Welcome to this talk about the 5 elements and the Tibetan teachings on the wisdom they contain. The elements are earth, water, fire, air, and space. And when they're in balance in our body, energy, and mind, we can live happier, healthier lives. If you'd like more free resources on the elements, please find the link in the info box below to get teachings on all 5 elements organized into an email series. Plus, you'll be notified of future live teachings. This talk was recorded live on Insight Timer and only lightly edited, so you'll hear me respond to questions and comments. You'll find links below to the resources that I mentioned in the talk. I hope you enjoy learning about the elements and how to balance them for a more satisfying life. Let's just jump into the fire element. We're finally arriving at an element that I personally really relate to. I think the fire element, it's one that I think really connects with some of the values of our culture more. So the fire element is about creativity, it's about passion, it's about that juice, that energy that you bring to whatever you do in your life. We've talked in the previous 2 elements, the earth element and the water element, and with those 2, with the earth element, there's a contentment, there's a joy, there's just like a settledness and a feeling good in your own skin and just having like solid ground beneath you. Like that's kind of the positive, balanced aspect of the earth element. With the water element, that positive, balanced aspect of it is you feel the contentment, you feel at home, you feel a sense of like ease and flow and connection in your life. And with the fire element, when it's balanced and you have enough fire but not too much, you have something more like bliss. It's like this passion about what you're doing. It's very connected with creativity. So each of these, they come with their own forms of what you might call joy as like a shorthand, enjoyment, being able to be in the present moment, being able to do what you do with love and care. Well, I'll read you Tenzin Wangyal Rinpoche's description of a balanced fire element because it's just so good. The positive aspect of fire is the capacity to create, to initiate projects on every level, and to accomplish what creativity sets in motion. So you have like the oomph, not just to have the idea, but to follow up on it and to get it done. The joy of fire is more related to enthusiasm and bliss in the body, and the joy of waking experiences. The higher experience of fire is the bliss of being. The bliss of being, who doesn't want that? I'm feeling kind of fiery just talking about it. So I think the balanced aspects of the fire element are things that most of us want. Creativity, enjoyment, this sense, it talks in this chapter, Tenzin Wangyal Rinpoche talks about how we can initiate projects. The air element is about doing and change and things like that. So there could be a lot of air element. We could initiate projects, but without that fiery aspect of enjoying that project and wanting to see it through, there's not the bliss of creativity in those projects that we're doing. Hello, MX Sib. Hello, welcome. So with the fire element, it's different from earth. It's kind of the opposite of earth in a certain way. Earth is about settling in, it's about stability, it's about being where you are. And the fire element is about enjoying where you are, but from where you are, then being able to create, to bring something new into the world. MXIB says, I went to UH Clear Lake. Yeah, I taught at UH Clear Lake for a while. That is really cool. We used to be virtually neighbors. I used to live in Houston. And now I live in Quebec. So hence the fuzzy clothing. So with the fire element, It's also obviously the opposite of water. Water is the flow, it's the ease, it's the comfort of life. There's a certain joy to water. The thing about water, though, is especially if it becomes unbalanced and you have too much water, then you're more likely to just kind of let things stay as they are, enjoy the circumstances, even maybe when they should be changed. So the element that's different with fire is that passionate creativity, that longing to create, and to, one thing that Tenzin Wangyal Rinpoche says in his description of this element, and that I've really found true in my own life, I think fire and air are probably my dominant elements. So I'll just say that now. I feel like I can give a better inside description of the fire element than water or earth, because I just have a harder time with those. But with the fire element, in meditation, what often happens is you have a lot of ideas coming up. Your mind is always thinking of new stuff. I find this so frequently. I like to do my first meditation session at the beginning of the day before I start work. And often what I do in that first session is called the foundational practices of Tibetan Buddhism. So there's a lot of different, parts to it, and that kind of keeps my mind more focused. But if I'm just doing some silent sitting in the morning, which I also usually do, it's just my brain coming up with ideas for courses and for series here on Insight Timer, or, here's the next book I want to write. And it can be like really nonstop. So that's when the fire element gets a little too intense. So I want to talk about meditation a bit more in a moment, but that's kind of the unbalanced aspect of the fire element. Too much. There's this creative energy, but there's too much coming through. Also, if there's just a lot of fire in somebody's personal makeup, you can become easily frustrated, kind of quick-tempered. So it leads you to create and to have that impulse toward the new, but it also can lead you to too much impulsiveness, too much acting on, a small external stimulus. So your response can just be too much. And one thing that is not really in the book that I'm using for this series, Healing with Form, Energy, and Light, but was in one of the previous retreats that my teachers at Dawn Mountain have done on the elements, is like the fieriness. It is also about connection. It's about relationships with people. And if you have a lot of that fire element in the way that you connect with people, you want that connection. You want to know them. You want to be, up in their business. You want them to know your business, but it can be overwhelming. So it can kind of burn up all the fuel that person has to connect with you, and then they're done. They have nothing left. So that's one way that the fire element could be a little bit overwhelming. And personally, again, coming back to a meditative context, just to have so much stuff that wants to come through all the time also can be a little bit draining or overwhelming. When you have too little of the fire element, it can feel like nothing sparks your interest. Nothing brings you joy. And I think a lot of people who are experiencing depression have that sense of the fire, the creativity, the spark of life. Just, they can't seem to catch it. Nothing really catches fire for them. Jennifer says, sounds like this Sag. I'm guessing that's Sagittarius right here, which is a fire sign, I think. Is that right? There's also a whole system of elements in Western thought. It's connected with astrology and Western, like medieval medicine. There's also a whole field of Tibetan medicine that's very connected with these 5 elements, but it's such a big field. I don't know that much about it, and B, it's too much to go into in this series. But, a lot of these ideas about the elements, like, it's just humans looking at the world around them and seeing patterns, So a lot of the descriptions of like the fire element, I think everybody associates fire with passion and creativity and, that kind of thing. So what I'm saying may carry over into like systems beyond Tibetan Buddhism, but I'm not familiar with them, so I won't try and speak to them. Rosa says, as a Piscean, I'm a strong water sign and I want to kindle more fire in myself. Yeah, this is, I discussed a little bit the earth element and the water element. The idea here is to have a healthy, balanced example of each of these 5 elements in our lives. So for me, fire is natural and water is not. And earth is not also. So like especially the earth element is something that I try and cultivate in meditation, or, I'll take a walk and just like pause and touch a tree or connect with a rock or something to feel that earth element in real life. So Anand says, I'm a Virgo and I have ideas, but when it comes to executing, I stop. Right, and Virgo is an air sign. I'm a Libra, air sign. So it's the same thing, a lot of intellectual ideas with air, which is coming up next week, but it doesn't necessarily have that passion, that sort of heart passion. Anand said, no, we are earth. Oh, okay, sorry. Trying to claim you for my Libra is an air sign. So yeah, I mean, again, with the earth element, you can have the ideas, but if you're kind of too settled where you are, again, it's hard to get forward momentum on that. Logan says, same. So getting back to a sort of deficient earth element or fire element, if you have too little fire and you don't have that kind of passion, that creativity, then life feels a little bit stale. You can have a really strong water element, for instance, and feel the comfort, feel the ease, but there's not necessarily the newness and creativity that comes with the fire element. So I want to just mention fire in the context of meditation, and then I'll talk about some ways of noticing and cultivating fire in daily life. Arlene says, I'm Aquarius and have lots of ideas, but need more fire. Okay, clearly I'm not that great with Western astrology. Aquarius, is that air? Maggie says, I had a burning desire to start painting 2 years ago. Just finished my second painting. Woohoo, right on. So we'll talk about this a bit more next week probably too, but fire and air really pair well together. And, or maybe I should say it's natural for them to go together in the way that it's natural for earth and water to go together. So for instance, if you have a strong fire element and you have a strong air element, then you have the intellectual ideas, but you also have that passion and creativity to want to put them into action. It also helps if you have a little earth element to give you that like stick with itness. So you don't just kind of start this new thing, start that new thing, and then once it's not new and exciting, it's over. Maggie says, I'm on 601 days of Insight Timer. That's awesome. Way to go. Yeah, way to stick with it too. That's some good, groundedness in this practice. MX Sib says, this week is my year, 365 days. Congratulations, you guys. That's so awesome. So to shift over into the fire element in meditation, I already mentioned that Tenzin Wangyal Rinpoche talks about how the fire element, if we have too much of it, it can lead to just too much stuff that wants to come through all at the same time. And in meditation, it can be really helpful to counter that like stuff wanting to come through with the earth element. So fortunately, if you have too much fire in your meditation, you can use your body. You can use the contact between the base of your body and whatever you're sitting on and bring your attention into that. And that is a way of connecting with that earth feeling of groundedness, rootedness. Personally, I find that when my mind just starts spinning and I have all these ideas coming through, it's like my energy has kind of gotten further up in my body. And if I can drop that energy back down deeper into the body, into the, what in yoga they call the sacral chakra, or in Qigong they call it the dantian, or even into the root chakra, it can be a way of kind of regrounding and reconnecting with that earth energy. So if, like me, in your meditation practice, you just have stuff coming up all the time, some earth element related practices can be really good to kind of balance that out. MX Sib says, I would have loved to be in a class taught by you. I graduated from Rice. I am a Rice girl. My mom went to Rice. We're a nerdy family, so I appreciate the shout out from MX Sib. If you don't have enough fire in your meditation practice, there are practices that Tenzin Wangyal Rinpoche talks about, but they're kind of more advanced. So I think actually for myself, anything that gets you inspired or enthusiastic about your practice can be a good way of bringing a bit more of that fire element to your meditation practice. So for instance, if you're feeling not fiery enough, and I mean, I am not the right person to necessarily talk about this. So if you are a not fiery person and you have tips for how you cultivate that passion and creativity in your meditation practice, please drop them in the chat. But my ideas for that would be, to read a new book on meditation or on the Dharma, whatever spiritual tradition you practice, to bring in some new information, to see if something sparks your attention and enthusiasm. You can try a different type of meditation. Here on Insight Timer, there's tens of thousands or hundreds of thousands of tracks. So you can try something new. See what speaks to you. The other thing I would say, Maggie says curiosity. Yeah, totally. Steve says breath work. Yeah. If breath work works for you, that can be a powerful way to do something new and kind of spark some literal heat in your body. So trying different types of meditation. The other thing is even noticing in a meditation session what's new, what's changing can be really helpful. So if you're meditating on the breath and it's the same meditation that you've been doing, in my case, like for decades now, it can be really helpful just to notice the changes that happen in every session. You sit down and your mood is like this, and by the time you're finished with your meditation, how is your mood? Are your thoughts about the past, the present, or the future? How does it shift? So just noticing what's different and fresh can help to spark a little bit of creativity. Logan says, I love to listen to Dharma talks and podcasts while at work, and it gets me in the mood to meditate when I get home. Yeah, exactly. That's a great way to use all these online resources. I love discovering a new teacher, hearing a new approach, even to something that I've heard about time and time again. So I think any of these things that are new and fresh and can spark a little curiosity and creativity in you, any of that can be good for kind of boosting your fire element in your practice a bit. So please keep your recommendations for adding more of that creativity and fire to your practice coming. I'm going to talk about some ways to cultivate the fire element and notice it in daily life. And please feel free to drop your ideas and comments and what's worked for you in the chat also. So I think I've mentioned I am in Quebec. I am from Texas, so cold weather is not my natural forte. I kind of came up here with a definite fear and hatred of the cold, and I have learned how to kind of layer up and get out in it. So I've become very aware, and it's the second day of February right now. So we're in the middle of winter still. I've become very aware of heat, very aware of my own body heat as I kind of layer up and keep that heat inside. And honestly, just feeling your body, feeling the heat that you generate, it's one extremely simple way of connecting with the fire element, but it's always with you. It's always accessible. So that's one way to do it. Noticing whether you're hot or cold. I mean, your body is always creating this heat within you, but then your body is also amazing at regulating your temperature. So we can withstand all these variations in temperature, and it's just interesting to notice how you feel at a given temperature. So for instance, it's been really cold up here in Quebec. I think the wind chill has been down close to about minus 35 Celsius. Minus 40 is where Celsius and Fahrenheit connect. So it's really daggum cold. But the incredible thing is, I pull on a balaclava, I pull on all my layers, it takes like 10 minutes to get dressed to go outside, but I step out and all that heat creates this little microclimate. So that's one way that I've been noticing cold and heat and connecting with it. If you have access to a sauna, boom, there you go. That's your connection with the fire element right there. As with any element, whether we're talking about heat or cold or whatever, you can overdo it. So you definitely want to know what's comfortable and what's outside your limits. But if, like me, you have issues with the cold and you want to just soak in that fiery heat element, actually doing that physically is a great way to do it. I talked about connecting with the water element in the shower. When you take a hot shower, you're getting water and fire at the same time. So you can kind of take both of those in and just feel, when you have the right level of fire, feel how pleasant that is. Fire and bliss are very associated, and it is blissful to take a hot shower. If you don't connect with that easily, just imagine that hot shower is coming on the end of a week or two camping in the wilderness with no shower. Oh, best experience ever. If it's summertime and the sun's out and you're on the beach, the sun is kind of the ultimate source for that fire element in our lives. And it's a great way to connect with and really just, accept this fire element from the outside world. So same thing with an actual fire. Again, all of these are kind of instances in the natural world of a balanced fire element. The sun is out there doing its thing, and if it's Texas and it's the summertime, it may not feel like a balanced fire element. So maybe that's not the right time to connect with fire through the sun. But if it's springtime, or if you're in a climate that's not as hot and you're able to just enjoy and soak in that energy, it's really nice. And I think actually something like a campfire is a really good analogy for the fire element, because when you create a little space for it and it has its own fuel and it has its own place to burn, it's beautiful, it's warming, you can cook food on it, it's useful. If that same fire gets out of control, it can just destroy everything. So one thing I find really interesting is that there was actually kind of a conversation on the circle that I facilitate here on Insight Timer. It's called Buddhist Wisdom Modern Life. I'll put it in the comments. You're welcome to join it if you're interested. But there was kind of a conversation about the elements and which ones kind of scare people and which ones feel comfortable. And obviously, fire is an element where the frightening aspect of it is kind of obvious. Fire gets out of control and it burns your house down, or you get a bad sunburn from the sun. We've seen with Australia, with the Western US, we've just seen these wildfires burn out of control, and it's clear how destructive that is. But the same is true with all the other elements too. Something that came up in the chat in our circle was there's earthquakes, there's tsunamis, there's, if again, those of us from the Houston area, there's flooding, there's tornadoes with the air element getting out of control. So these elements I think we as modern humans in like mechanized societies probably don't feel this as much as, someone in Tibet 200 years ago. But these elements are really powerful and we don't control them. The earthquake recently near Tonga that led to all these tsunamis, it's just an example. I mean, there's no human technology that can control an earthquake. Houston is an incredibly advanced city in some ways. I mean, not necessarily in terms of how it deals with water because it is built on a floodplain and there's really nowhere for the water to go, but you have the Texas Medical Center there. You have some, NASA's headquartered there. And yet when it rains, that water can overwhelm the city and, people can drown, houses are ruined. So it's just a really big deal and it's something we don't control. And I think that's actually really important to keep in mind as we work with these elements, that this isn't just kind of something that, how do I say it, that's kind of like cute or like a, new agey self-help, like this is only something that Gwyneth Paltrow is doing kind of thing. Like this is what makes up our world. And the idea that we have within us the same elements that can create an earthquake or a hurricane or a massive forest fire, I think to me it's a reminder of the power that each of us has just as a living being, as a human who has, as the Buddhists would say it, Buddha nature, or however you want to think about that sacred nature. I think we tend to think of ourselves as these like little isolated creatures and, we're just all trying to survive, but there's this vastness that we're also connected to. So I just want to give a shout out to the folks involved in that conversation, Claudia and Logan. I don't remember if you were part of that conversation or not, but some folks, just thinking through this stuff. So that's just a few ideas about cultivating the fire element in daily life. I think I'm going to wind it down before too long. So if anybody has any questions, any comments, please drop them in the chat. Maggie says, so happy to find you. So happy also that you found me. And I have to say, a lot of the folks who have been commenting and who are online, they are very cool folks. I totally invite you to join Buddhist Wisdom Modern Life. I'm actually really not that good personally about like joining in the chat and stuff. I don't know why, but I'm not good at that. But there's a lot of people there who are very supportive and kind and knowledgeable. So please feel free to connect with all of us there. So that's most of what I wanted to say about the fire element. I think for me, the main benefits of trying to balance that fire element, trying to notice when I'm getting too fiery, maybe a little too intense, burning up all my fuel, burning out the people around me, burning bridges, as the saying goes. It's just good to have the fire element as a kind of language for thinking through what's my behavior like? What's my mental world like? How can I balance that out again? Or if you're feeling not fiery enough, again, this doesn't tend to be my issue, but I know it is a big issue for a lot of people. What are some ways to connect with that fire and vitality, creativity? I think it's helpful to have that as a kind of vocabulary for thinking about our lives. And especially for me, to hear the fire element connected with meditation and connected with the fact that there's just so many thoughts and so many ideas coming through almost every single time I sit down to meditate. It's just really helpful to know that's not because I am a bad person and a bad meditator. It's because that's my preset, my factory preset, so to speak. And there are ways that I can counterbalance that. Cultivating the earth element in meditation, which incidentally you do through calm abiding practices. Cultivating the water element in meditation. It's about connection, heart opening practices. So fire is amazing. It brings creativity, vitality, passion. Next week, we're going to talk about the air element. So I will be scheduling soon a talk, should be for next Wednesday. I also want to do a talk next week on how to actually structure and organize your meditation practice. That was supposed to be for tomorrow. I'm going to have to cancel that session. Just want to let you know that. So if you're not following me on the timer, please give me a follow, and that way you'll know when I set these things up. Yeah, so we'll do air next week and space the week after. And after that, maybe since it's been so many teachings for a while, maybe we'll do some meditations instead. So please feel free to let me know in the chat what you'd like to have a session about, what types of meditations you'd be interested in after this series wraps up. And Ursula says, living in an old house with a wood stove for being warm and for cooking, I'm always with fire and will look at it differently. Yeah. One of the places that I get to go and do retreat in, well, actually both of the places up here in Canada have wood burning stoves, and there's something so primal about getting up in the morning and building a fire and arranging the logs so the fire can breathe, you know? I think out of these elements, to me, fire feels like one of the most alive, because when you set the logs up in a stove, they have to have airflow. They have food that they consume, that's their fuel. They have to breathe. I really feel this identification with fire. Patricia says, what's the difference between air and space? Well, we're going to go into this a lot more in these next 2 weeks. Air obviously is the air we breathe. It's about movement. It's about intellect and curiosity. Space is the space within which all the other elements arise. So in like Western astrology, for instance, there are 4 elements: earth, water, fire, and air. In Tibetan Buddhism, space is added on as the 5th element. And honestly, space in a way is the most profound of all the elements, because that spaciousness of mind is a really close analog to the spaciousness of emptiness, of Buddha nature. So we're going to talk more about that 2 weeks from now. Yeah, I don't want to say too much, but if you haven't grabbed this book, Healing with Form, Energy, and Light by Tenzin Wangyal Rinpoche, it's really good. He goes into a lot more detail and also into discussions of more advanced practices related to these elements. I want to keep it simple because simple is helpful for me, and it's a really wonderful teacher in the Bön tradition of Tibet, and also someone who's collaborated and co-written a book with one of my teachers, Anne Klein. Mostly I just want to say thank you for tuning in and for being interested in the elements that make up our bodies, our minds, the outside world. I'm really looking forward to talking about air and space and sort of completing this vocabulary, so to speak, of ways of working with ourselves and the world around us. Thanks for listening to this teaching on the elements. Please take a moment to sign up for the free email course to get the teachings from this series, invitations to live events, and more.